Hello everybody, welcome. This is the Zoe DevOps as a curriculum session. So my name is Rochelle Agro and I'm a software engineer for Beta Systems Software. So in my current role, I'm currently at the hybrid stage with both that I'm developing still with our mainframe software, but also I'm the one that's introducing them to new tools, especially like Zoe and other open source tools, to be incorporated in our day-to-day tasks. So this talk is about how to incorporate Zoe and DevOps processes into just your day-to-day work as programmers or as a system inside your company. So let's start with some stats. I always like to start with some statistics. So this is from the 2024 4-star mainframe application developer study, and these are the top reported barriers to productivity for mainframe application developers. So as you can see, it's pretty much split between three. One is lack of autonomy, and then there's outdated tools and frameworks, and then interruptions and code switching. So this is from a survey, but actually in my current role, I'm also teaching not just newcomers, so we have our apprentices and new to Z, but also our folks who are tenured professionals in our company, but they want to learn about new tools. So this statistic mirrors exactly what I found in my when I was teaching them in my work. So let's go through each one. So I categorize it into three. First is culture shock. There's a foreign feeling, and this goes both ways. Like from the new to Z, of course, when they see that I still have green screen, it's foreign to them. But at the same time, when I'm teaching more tenured professionals, and we have to go through JSON and YAML and CI/CD, it's foreign to them as well. So there is a learning curve, and today's developers have expectations. So whether that's I can just use my mouse, or I don't want to use my mouse at all, I want to use my keyboard. So both of those things are challenging. And then there has to be a mindset shift that has to happen in order to use all of these tools. So the culture shock, I think, for me happens in three ways. First is that there's a perception issue, right? So as we said before, there's an outdated myth that mainframe is outdated, but it is a perception issue, right? As you can see, like in this conference, we can see lots of topics that are not outdated at all. And then, as I mentioned, the user interface, user experience about clicking around and so on. So there's some culture shock there. And students especially, they want instant feedback and automation. So if I'm coding in a tool that doesn't give me spell check even, then it's hard for them to get into it. Even the autosave feature is something that's very important for them, apparently. And then for the learning curve, of course, as we know, there's a specialized knowledge that needs to happen, right? Like when you're learning RAMF or the security features on the mainframe, there's a learning curve there. And then often we go into access issues. We encounter access issues and that prevents them from having hands-on experiences. So there's no sandbox for them to learn, and it's difficult to learn something if you don't have any hands-on experience. And because they don't have access, they also don't have learnings about the real-world projects that they can do with the tools that we have. But what we are going to focus now is on the mindset shift that has to happen. So instead of just understanding code, there should be some diagnostic skills that you need to have, like especially the mainframe, when the JCL fails, you need to have some specific knowledge about how to find which part of the program failed and so on. But I also found that there's an inertia that needs to be overcome because there is resistance to change, not just from, as I said, tenured professionals that they don't want to change or shift the tools that they use, but also like if a student doesn't know the tool, they don't want to learn a new one. And so what I found was when I used the DevOps philosophy, it's not very prescriptive, but when I try to introduce the concepts through DevOps, that's when I got the most results. So the tool I used to help them understand it is DevOps. So why DevOps? So to me, the four main features that I use is rapid iteration cycles. So we don't go through each one in a long form way, but we just quickly change if something doesn't work. So we can leverage many different tools, as I said, Zoe and other modern open source tools. And then the process and the people and the platform, we connect it. Right? And the mindset shift happens because you understand the concepts of DevOps in a way that you also understand the mainframe concepts at the same time. So why Zoe? Why do we use Zoe and other open source tools to learn DevOps and to learn the concepts, right? So I came from a Zoe background, so I was part of the Zoe Explorer project under Open Mainframe project, and so I'm very familiar with the Zoe, not just so the APIs, the CLIs, and the Explorer. So to me, it was a very natural shift on or way to lean on the tool to also bridge what I know and what other people know. But in general, Zoe is a bridge from what learners know, and it lowers the implementation barrier. And what I like is that it is open source, so there's less access issues, and it's community based. So when we're studying and we find something, it's not that we are stopped like, okay, that's a bug feature, but we can actually contribute. So I really like that. And then there's also the possibility of early automation and scripting. So that's why for me, in my personal curriculum, I use Zoe and DevOps as tools to learn concepts. So let's go through each stage of the DevOps loop as our modules to introduce mainframe concepts, modern tools, and then building that proficiency with DevOps as well. So we go to plan, develop, build, test. I combine release and deploy and then operate and monitor. So let's start with plan. Yeah. So in planning, we want to establish the process, right? So we want to define the scope of requirements, and so this is where we introduce project management, creating stories or tickets, and then I try to introduce GitHub projects. We go actually to the Zoe GitHub and search for the different squads if they have projects, for example, in Zoe Explorer, because I was very familiar with the Zoe GitHub of Zoe Explorer. So we go through that, see how the issues are bugged and tagged. I think that's an important part of the process as well. And then the Kanban boards, right? So we see the different stages of the development, whether that's something that is considered for this iteration or for the next iteration. So we establish that process already. But then we go through a lab. So we, in our classroom, we create a repo, and that's when we first introduce the Git as well. That collaboration, we start that immediately. Even if it's just the comments on the markdown, or even just with the creating of those issues, right, inside the project itself. Then we assign those issues to the module. So if we have a use case, for example, so what we usually do is we take a program, maybe that's a common program, and then we try to have a story that will add a feature, and then also add a story to update a feature. So that's what we will go through in the lab. So we will assign those. We will break down the stories, different tasks, we assign those stories. And so we have a plan stage of, these are the things that we want to work on, these are the issues, and who is assigned to which. So the takeaway there is that we want to start with good DevOps, and it starts with visibility and collaboration. We want to manage the work items using version control, so we learn that immediately, and so we can plan iteratively. So that's the first. And then the next part is develop. Probably this is the biggest topic because we break it down into 3 parts. So first, we go through API basics, which means we start from the Swagger UI. So we introduce not in the beginning, not ZOS resources, but API, cat API, dog API, you know. So it's broken down into something that everybody is familiar with, everybody already knows. And then we use that to introduce ZOS APIs. And then the second part is coding for ZOS using IDEs, and of course we use Zoe Explorer. So we access and use ZOS resources. What I like to do when we're doing the Zoe Explorer part is I show them the backend as well, that these, on the backend, these are still ZOSMF APIs that we're using. And then the code review comes. So let's go through each lab. So for, as I mentioned in the API lab, I share them the Swagger UI and we go through the pet API. And this is usually, the students really like, finding photos of their dogs or their cats. But what they take away from that is, this is what the API request is, how to formulate that headers, the body of the request, and what you get out of that. So even if some professionals don't know what JSON is, this is the first time they will see it. So immediately, because it's something that's familiar to them, they will get it. And then we move to ZOS API. So the same way that you access those resources is the same way that you access ZOS resources, whether that's to upload a file, submit a JCL, so it will be the same. So that's our first lab. And then we move on, as I said, to Zoe Explorer. So aside from just getting familiar with the UI, right? Because sometimes the UI itself is unfamiliar. I've also had requests to do this in IntelliJ, not just in VS Code, but we use Zoe Explorer in both cases to access those ZOS resources. And then the next part of that is the LSB. So we try to incorporate other language help to those code that they do, just so they can understand that there's more to just this, you're coding in a different way. There's something more that you can add, right, to your workflow. I also like the VS Code actions that you can do. Like if you want to compile, you can set Control-C or Control-F, something like that. Or you can some keyboard shortcuts to immediately compile the code, run a JCL, submit something, and then get the result. So I like to do that because for tenured professionals, that's what they enjoy. That this is not something that's for just new people, but something that I can incorporate and it will make my coding faster. And then the last one is, or for this stage, I introduce code reviews. So cloning, committing, adding, and pushing to a sample project. So what I prefer is that if I provided a bunch of tools to the different to the students, and they have preference. For example, one likes to code in VS Code, one is in IntelliJ, one is in just in ISPF. That's fine. I think when we introduce the sample project, everybody sees that it's one code repository. It doesn't matter which tool you use to push your code. If you push it to a repository, it's ours, and there's one outcome, which is a code for our customers. So I'm going to give one example of this. So we had one story that we had to change, like a parm, just a parm that is like in 30 JCLs in different data sets, in different libraries. So my coworker and we said, okay, let's do this side by side. And so when I pushed my code, because in IDEs it's simple, right? Find and replace, and then push that code to the IDE. So it became sort of a conversation starter between the two of us, like how did you do that so quickly? If in my head I know also how to do that in SPF, for example. But it became a conversation starter. It's not saying that I support just using IDEs, but also that there are some things that I prefer doing still in ISPF, but there are some things that I really prefer using the IDEs. But as I mentioned, the goal here is to see that we can use different code or different tools, but if we are working towards one story in that repository, it goes to one result for the customers. So the key takeaway here is, as I said, that learners can develop where they are comfortable and make use of the benefits of IDEs. So one example of this is that I was teaching Java to COBOL developers, and so they're very familiar with coding in Eclipse, So, but when I showed them the IntelliJ Zoho Explorer plugin, some of them switched, right? But when we pushed our code together, it doesn't matter. It's agnostic what code you use. It's still the same Java code. Or if you're coding in COBOL, it's still the same COBOL code, right? So I think that's where you're comfortable is where you can reap more benefits. And then the next stage is build. So this is where we introduce a Zoe CLI. So they learn what building means on ZOS. Building in your own workstation, whether that's compiling code locally or on ZOS or on containers, right? Because sometimes if you push the script to a container, you can do that as well. And then I think the main part here is the compiling and packaging using JCLs. So compiling using JCLs or using Makefile to compile build your code is what we use. And of course we use the backend Zoe CLI, but recently we also introduced open automation utilities. So the lab that we do is of course scripting. So we script a lot with Zoe CLI, other SDK. So I give my students a choice whether they want like Java SDK, Python SDK, and I usually get requests for Python. So that's very popular nowadays. So, but again, I like to give them freedom. So if these are the resources and these are the things that we want to, for example, to package, and to compile, to build, let's give the students that freedom of choice of which scripting tool that they're going to use, right? So me, I'm very familiar with Zoe CLI. So that's what I teach. So we go through each like iteration of adding files, creating files, deleting files, and then submitting JCLs and so on and so forth. That script, and then also running JCLs, polling that job, getting the results, and then testing that result. So that's what we do in our classroom. So the takeaway there is that automation replaces repetition. So we don't want to keep just running things the same way all the time. And also we want to use automation to distribute the packages, and we can use different frameworks, like I said, like Makefile, Gradle, to build mainframe code. So it's not just for distributed packages anymore. So we can use that even for mainframe code. And then the next part is testing. So in testing, I introduced this. This is where we introduce Jest, Mocha, and Robot. So it involves, again, the use of Zoe CLI within this or Node.js packages that we use to build, to test the code. So the students really like this lab because the lab involves adding or making changes to some code. As I mentioned, the story that we built is we are adding some codes, adding some feature, and also changing some code. So both of those things, we add tests or update the tests, and then the game began with I'm going to assign this to you, and they started racing to get the green check marks. So I think this is a good way to also introduce those mentorship like skills and just the teaching tips and tricks, right? Because they learn more when it's gamified. So I really like that they started rushing even before our scheduled time. They already have their green check marks. So this is a Jest test suite that we did to test the mainframe. So the takeaway there is that testing early prevents failures later. So, and students learn to run automated tests, promoting continuous quality assurance. And so, the next stage, I combine release and deploy, and this is where we introduce CI/CD. So what we do is we do Jenkins and GitHub Actions. So either ZOSMF workflows, this is where you can introduce Ansible as well, and then artifact repository managers like Nexus or JFrog or Artifactory, all of those tools. But I think the topic that's most difficult is semantic versioning. So the release process on which package to build with what tag and so on. So that's what we automate in this stage. So the lab is to add a new pipeline. So again, this is where the students want to be the first one to get all green check marks, whether it's just in a regular Jenkins or in Blue Ocean. Like we have a board that's displaying all of our pushes and branches, and the first one to get the green check mark, it's something that they aspire for. So that new pipeline stage is connected to our story as well. So they feel that there is some closure to what they added to the code. So the takeaway there is that learners understand version tagging, approvals, controlled release pipelines, moving code and artifacts through environment safely and predictably. So the concept there is that from running your code or changing the code, we build, test it, because in our, as you can see in our, here. So the basic pipeline is you install Zoe in that container, issue Zoe command, allocate project data sets, upload source from your branch, and then run the test script. So there's a complete loop there of these are my changes. We already established that this is a test script. We added some more test script, and we run that. And so sometimes I put a trick there that the test script was originally wrong, so they have to figure out that sometimes it's not the test script. The test is failing not because your code is wrong, but the test script is wrong, right? So it's another way to bring those skills to the students. And then the last stage there is operate and monitor. And this is where we introduce the orchestration, whether that's Docker Kubernetes or Grafana, and then the Elk Stack, which is Elasticsearch, and then Splunk. So in container orchestration, we want to build that performance utilization thinking mindset, right? Because it's not just that we are writing a bunch of code, but we also want this to be in a elegant way that it doesn't take up so much space. Especially on running on the mainframe, we don't want to have a bunch of open address spaces to occupy bits, for example. So if your code does that, then it's something that this is where we catch it, right? And then we analyze metrics to aid in troubleshooting. So the lab for me here is very simple. It's just to deploy the build artifacts to different containers. So what we do is have different containers for each operating system, for example, and test those scripts that we did, for example, in those different environments, just so we have a thinking of, oh, it's running on my machine, right? So that's the whole purpose of containerization, that it should work, that the build should work on different machines, and we can test that, right? So if you, for example, in Zoe Explorer, we do the testing for different environments and different operating systems and so on. So that's the same principle that we apply, like in testing the lab for operate and monitor. So the key takeaway here is that we want to build shared ownership, because sometimes when, in my own experience, when I'm a developer, I'm just pushing code. If it works, it works, right? But sometimes we fail to think about the resource utilization and so on. So if we also include that as part of our loop, we also feel like we own that problem. We're not just building and then the code is bloated now. We want to be able to close that feedback loop, as I mentioned here. So we can plan the next one without thinking, oh, this is something that we can deal with later. So that brings us back to the loop as we plan the next iteration. So in each phase we introduce not just mainframe concepts, but also DevOps principles and proficiency with that. So I think, to me, the most important part is these are all important concepts, but we looped it in a way that they have a story that they can follow, and they have ownership of each phase of that loop. That my code, my change affects something further down, and I also own that. So that's my curriculum that we did with that I did, and it works. So I think we see here that we are able to overcome the challenges that we mentioned earlier. We introduced modern tooling. We did streamlining through automation, and then they are empowered through self-service tools. As I mentioned, it's not prescriptive. We can use different tools for different topics and techniques, but it is the same code. Use the same repository. So other lessons from the field. So as I'm teaching this, one of the things is that I noticed that it really speeds up onboarding. So the things that we talked about, I know that the students are using that in their day-to-day work because they learn that in a context that is a complete story for them. For tenured professionals, they really like that they can automate their workflows, streamline repetitive tasks. So instead of scraping ISPF screens to change things, they want to use either IDE features or running scripts. So that's when I learned that DevOps can be the curriculum and the standard, and it really promotes collaboration. So in some of my classrooms, we have people, not just developers, but operations as well. So because they want to know what the developers need to be able to be more efficient in their work. So they try to also learn the other parts of, for example, the scripting and so on. They want to learn that as well. So it's beneficial because now they can also use that in their own work. So I just want to share some success story here. And so these are the apprentices that I taught. So they were students. Some of them are not mainframe or tech students, right? So in my company, Beta Systems, we have an apprentice program, and so when they learned that I was part of the Open Mainframe project, Zoe, so they wanted me to teach our apprentices with those topics. And so we did the entire course with them. One of the things that they first asked me is, why are we doing it this way, right? So, and to me, that's a call for engagement, right? Instead of saying, oh, we've always done it this way, it's something that they need to understand the why, so they can understand, or so that the how can fit them as well, right? So, to me, the success is that now some of them are my colleagues, so they're working with me now as developers as well. So I'm really happy about that. So the course that we did, that I did with them, so I'm introducing a new course in January with a new set of apprentices. So that's what we're doing because they have a good feedback on how everything is introduced. So we're doing that again. So my advice is to build your own curriculum and start small, so you don't have to go through each of the full loop. Maybe start with just build or plan, develop, build, right? You don't have to do the testing immediately, or you don't have to do the orchestration immediately. So start small. Then reuse your components. So if you have for yourself your own scripts and your own tools, use that, because these are the things that you use in your own company that can be helpful for others as well. And then, as I mentioned, make it end-to-end. You can automate a small project. It doesn't have to be something huge. As I said, our goal was to add a new feature or change a new feature. So automate that small project, and then that can build the scale. And so, and finally, focus on the process and not the tools. So as I mentioned in the beginning, the mindset shift has to happen, right? Without relying on the tool or what's trending, because we learned so many different tools in the beginning, but slowly by slowly, the things that matter, those are the ones that stick. And so if we remove that and are not prescriptive about our tools, but the mindset shift of maybe I can use something to automate this tool. That's, I think, the value of teaching a curriculum in that way. So next steps, I would advise everyone to go through the Open Mainframe Project developer resources. So what I found there was sample code, but also where you can build your sandbox. So many different developer resources are available there. And then what we use, me personally, I used a lot of the sample plugins in the Zoe GitHub, and then I also relied on the open source infrastructure as code within the Zoe packaging. So if you go through the Zoe packaging GitHub repository, they have good examples of how to build those infrastructure on packaging and building code. So I use that personally. And then if you have questions, I think that the community Slack, or the OMP community Slack is really helpful. So to me, those are my top 3 links and tools. So now, please, let's share what stage of DevOps cycle is hardest for your learners, or do you have any advice? Other Zoe features, other open source tools that you use. So maybe share your practical teaching tips. I think we have some more time, but if you have feedback, questions, comments, please.
I have a question, from an analysis perspective, how do you use Zoe Explorer, for analysis? I normally work on COBOL,
yeah,
and I use Zoe Explorer to do some analysis basically for the design.
So how do I use Zoe Explorer for analysis of code? So I think it begins with to me, I rely on, for example, the code snippets and highlighting of the IDE. That's one benefit. And then if you add the language support, for example, from whether that's with the proprietary tool or something else. So what really helps is, again, the interconnectivity of the different modules within COBOL or the copybooks and so on. So I really like that it's visible. Yeah, so to me, the benefit of the IDE, using IDE, there is the visibility, not just of variables, of copybooks, and so on. So I think it's easier to visualize stuff.
Okay, I use there's a function, outline function, which helps to,
for sure.
Yeah, so that's the only thing I use. I don't know, is there any other such?
So yes. So if you use the LSPs, I think IBM provides that as well. You can try that way in their repository. They have some COBOL code that works well with their LSP, and you can try that as well. Yeah, so it's open source. Well, it's not open source, but it's provided in their open GitHub.
Yeah, just to add to that, there's a couple different extensions. So they're proprietary because they're not necessarily open source. But from the IBM one is the Open Editor. It has COBOL syntax highlighting. Then Broadcom also has within Code4Z extension pack, but you can get it individually. It's COBOL language support extension that provides that. Also within that Code4Z extension pack, though, there's also this component called COBOL Control Flow, which will visualize all the components within that COBOL program and how they're calling each other. They can sort of give you a visualization if you're doing analysis. So just a couple options. There's lots of vendors playing in the Visual Studio Code marketplace today, though, so you can kind of just search COBOL or mainframe within the marketplace, and maybe you'll find something I didn't even mention. So
yeah, I agree. I think also Open Mainframe Project has COBOL Check, right? COBOL Check as well. It's another tool. I think that's now incorporated on the COBOL programming course, if I remember correctly.
That's right. Are you familiar with the COBOL programming course at all?
Not that much. I'm not into. I only do the analysis side of things.
So one thing that could be tied into a curriculum is COBOL programming course. It provides introductory COBOL concepts, but also then hands-on labs and an actual mainframe system. There's a lot of learners in universities, they don't have access to mainframe systems, so you can log on to this provided system and go through the hands-on labs and developing like what you said about building your own. I think that's
Yes.
a good point, and like a curriculum that could be shared in
Yeah.
the community is a direction I'd like to see. COBOL programming course is kind of something you sit down and you achieve as an individual learner, but it's been adapted into university curriculum, but not sort of in a standardized way. Like different professors have
Yeah.
taken it and used it and stuff like that.
And get the names down.
Yes. Sure, of course. Yeah. Great. So I think the last slide would be the feedback slide. So if like share your feedback, and I will share the links with this slide as well to the tools that I mentioned. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.